God's Word says that the Lord is a warrior, and this means that He is the one who gives warriors the strategies to win in battle. Welcome to Freedom Alive. General Jerry Boykin spent 36 years in the Army, serving his last 4 years as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence under President George W. Bush. He was one of the original members of the U.S. Army's Delta Force, a special unit primarily devoted to counterterrorism operations. General Boykin commanded all the Army's Green Berets, as well as the Special Warfare Center and School. He's a recipient of the Distinguished Service Medal, Bronze Star, and 2 Purple Hearts. And General Boykin now serves as the Family Research Council's Executive Vice President. I'm blessed to again be joined by co-host Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. And Matt, the Bible is full of warriors who fought for the safety and freedom and peace of their nations. And I can't help but think when you look at General Jerry Boykin, he stands out as a modern day warrior.
He does stand out as a modern day warrior. He loves God. He loves America. He has a distinguished military career, and he's still involved in fighting for America and for our freedom by encouraging people to vote, to understand the political process, and to understand the issues that we face as a nation.
This is a remarkable, highly credible, inspiring story of a warrior who has served on the front of the front lines for many years for our country. I think you're going to love it. Our Freedom Alert is next.
Political agendas make America's military weak. As a result of the Biden administration mandating political ideologies in the military, the U.S. Army, Navy, and Air Force have all reported they missed the military's annual recruiting goals this year by a combined 12%. That's nearly 20,000 recruits short, the worst since the U.S. military became an all-volunteer force in 1973. The Heritage Foundation commissioned a panel of defense experts, analysts, retired generals, and others. The report shows sharp drops in the public's trust and confidence. That's due to the Pentagon pushing agendas such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, and gender confusion, not to mention paying service members to travel for abortions, allowing HIV-positive members, gender confused, or those failing to meet combat standards, while punishing people who refuse the COVID shot further creates mistrust.
Up next, Matt's interview with Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin.
What a timely and special guest, Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, who now serves as the Executive Vice President for the Family Research Council, over 36 years of experience, 4 of which was Deputy Undersecretary for Defense of National Intelligence under President George W. Bush. And what a timely time for you to be with us here on Freedom Alive. Welcome to Freedom Alive, General Boykin.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's a real privilege to be on with you.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be with you, honor to call you my friend. Someone that I've known who loves the Lord, who loves God, is the quintessential member of the services. How did your faith actually impact you in your service career?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I've often thought about that. And I will say this, Matt, my faith, particularly during times of conflict, during times that we were in combat, meant everything to me because it was my ability to rely on the hand of our King, Jesus Christ, in those difficult situations where I knew that whatever happened, it was God's will, and I was the winner either way. And once you get that attitude, you just simply don't worry about what's going to happen to you, because you know it's all going to come out the way God wants it to.
Well, you were one of the original members of the U.S. Army's Delta Force, which is primarily devoted to counterterrorism. You also were part of what's been referred to as Black Hawk Down. So you've had some of those incredible times. You led all of the Army Green Berets. These are the elite fighters in the U.S. Army. You've seen all kinds of things. You've been out there on the front lines. You have received 2 Purple Hearts, a bronze medal. It's amazing your career and that your faith stood strong. Did your faith actually become stronger as part of what you experienced in the military?
Indeed, it did, Matt. And the reality is, when you see miracles occur, and I saw miracles occur. For example, in Iran, on the night of the 24th of April, 1980, when we went in to get the American hostages out of the embassy in Tehran, we had a really bad situation where a helicopter crashed on top of a C-130, and nobody should have survived that. As we watched in awe while we were praying, we saw 45 men come out of a burning wreckage, and there was no way they should have survived except by the hand of God. And when you see those kinds of things occurring, as we did, as I did personally, and the men that were with me, it strengthens your faith, and you just know that God's hand is upon you. And once again, I say that the outcome is in His hands, and you get to the point where you just trust Him totally.
Speaking of the Middle East, you served in Israel as part of your distinguished career. How did that change your life? How did it impact your life?
Wow. You know, Matt, it's interesting. I grew up in a home that truly believed that the Jews and the state of Israel were God's chosen people, and that we as Christians had an obligation to stand with them, to be with them, to be their allies, and living there with them and seeing what they were up against, seeing, mortars being fired, missiles being fired, other kinds of munitions being fired, certainly on at least a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, in some of those areas that we were in and that we operated from. And I really began to understand the difficulties and the challenges associated with living in Israel and never knowing when you were going to see something that you had never seen before, and most of the time that meant some kind of munitions being shot through the ceiling of your home, or out into the playground where your kids are, or at a bus where your children ride to school. And I just learned that these people they're tough, they're rugged, but they're also people that have families just like we do, that have future hopes and that type of thing. And I will tell you, for me, I got to the point where I had such absolute admiration for these people and what they had to put up with every day.
I know if we had, like in Sderot, which is near Gaza in the southern part of Israel, in the playground with swings and slides and sandboxes, a concrete reinforced worm, happy worm, that's actually serves as a bomb shelter, we would just not be able to tolerate that. But that's how they lived down there. What is your perspective on the war that's happening right now in this horrible, horrible carnage and massacre that the Hamas terrorists have inflicted on the Israeli people?
I think this is probably the most diabolical thing that I've seen anywhere. I mean, just the brutality of what we've seen here, and is continuing, by the way. I'll tell you, it is diabolical. Look, there is no question. This is a spiritual war that they are in, absolute spiritual war. And I believe that what you're going to ultimately see is you're going to see the Israelis prevail, because there is I'm trying to think. I think it's Joel, where the Israelis are promised that once they are restored to their homeland, they'll never be ejected again. So I think the Israelis are going to prevail in this, but I don't know what's going to happen between now and then, because we've already seen a lot of Jews as well as a lot of Muslims killed, and I think there's going to be more, but this is a war that has to be fought right now.
Yeah.
It has to be fought, and it's going to be a ground war, and they are going to kill a lot of people, and that's sad, but that's just the truth, the reality, because if they don't do it now, they're just going to have to do it again later, and each time they do it, they lose more people.
Yes, they do. I know, and you have people that you know that have lost their lives. We have people that we know that are called up right now in the IDF, young people that were out there doing their normal business, just like anyone else, but they're in their 30s or 40s, 20s, maybe called back up into the service. And they run to fight. It's an amazing resiliency that, like you said, really impacts your lives. And it is, you think that we've come a long way from Nazism, but in fact, we haven't come very far from Nazism. In fact, that spirit, dark satanic spirit, is still alive, and we see that happening. I saw a handwritten note on a Hamas soldier that said that the enemy has an incurable disease, and the only remedy is to cut out their hearts and livers. I mean, it's just unbelievable, despicable things, and you can see the consequences of taking your eye off the ball. Let's turn to the United States and our military, for example. I mean, obviously, we've always prided ourselves as being the most prepared military, the most lethal military in the world. But is our military, as it currently stands, prepared for war? Are they up to where they need to be?
Matt, the answer is no. And I don't know of anybody in the military today that would give you an honest assessment that we are at the top of our game right now. I don't think nobody is going to tell you that is telling the truth, that is really telling you the truth. And that is largely because we have poor leadership, starting at the commander-in-chief. We have leadership that does not appreciate the military, does not understand the mission of the military, and that has not focused on the things that would make our military capable of doing what MacArthur told the West Point cadets in 1962. Their mission is to win the wars, to win the nation's wars. As a matter of fact, he said, your mission remains fixed, determined, inviolable. It is to win the nation's wars. And I can't find, I don't think you'll find anybody that's being truthful that will tell you that we're at the top of our game right now.
It's certainly not to infiltrate a cultural concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is a video. This is a recruiting, or this is actually a training video, I should say. This is a training video in the Army. You were U.S. Army for 36 years, reached the highest levels in your area, distinguished. I can't imagine what it's like for you to watch this video that is actually being used right now within our military to teach our men and women, soldiers, on the proper use of pronouns. Let's watch.
Hi, my name is Johnny, and I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, and I'm Kanchi, and I use she, her pronouns.
And we're here to talk about pronouns.
What is a pronoun? A pronoun is how we identify ourselves apart from our name, and it's also how people refer to us in conversations.
Using the right pronouns is a really simple way to affirm someone's identity. It is a signal of acceptance and respect.
If it's a signal of acceptance and respect, how do we go about creating a safe space for everybody?
That's a good question. A really good way to do that is to use inclusive language. Instead of saying something like, hey guys, you can say, hey everyone, or hey team.
Yeah, and now that you say that, another way that we could show that we're allies and that we accept everybody is to maybe include our pronouns in our emails, or like we just did, introduce ourselves using our pronouns.
General Boykin, I don't know what you say to that kind of a video, but this is what's going on in the military. I mean, this is not some cartoon that we've made up. This is our United States military training our men and women in the services on the proper use of pronouns?
Matt, that's exactly what I was just talking about a few minutes ago, about the condition of our military. And keep this in mind. If you want to have warriors, you need to train warriors. And we're not training warriors. That's the kind of training that we're doing. That's the kind of training that we're spending our precious training time on. And the answer to everybody's question of why we're doing that is because this administration has an agenda that they are committed to. And that agenda does not include getting out there and preparing to go to war and defeat an enemy that wants to kill us. And instead, what we have is this kind of nonsense that contributes nothing to. Let me tell you one story, Matt, if you will indulge me here for a moment. The prisoners of war in Vietnam during the war, they were beaten routinely, and they would not talk. They would not reveal information, and they would not give any information to the enemy that in any way might be something that the enemy could use. But Jeremiah Denton was beaten severely when he came out on camera in his pajamas, and he said, they asked him, what do you think of your country's policies? And he looked in the camera and he said, I don't know my country's policies, but I still support them. He got beaten almost to death for that. But you go to 2016 and you look at those 2 patrol boats that were taken off the coast of Iran, and 1 hour after they were captured, the captain, a Naval Academy graduate that was responsible for both of those, stood up in his boat and looked at the cameras and said, this is all our fault, and we want to thank our host here for
the Iranians.
The Iranians. We want to thank them for what they've done for us. Now, that guy, hopefully that guy's out of the Army, out of the Navy today, and I understand that he is, but that's because, you know why? It's not really his fault. It's because he was forced to spend his precious training time on nonsense like pronouns rather than preparing for war and having 2 boatloads of men there that understood the law of land warfare.
Well, and that is even before this next recruiting video that we want to show you. This is a recruiting video. This is what the military is wanting to cast a vision of what it would be like to join the elite soldiers of the military. And this is an Army recruiting video as well. Take a look at this.
This is the story of a soldier who operates your nation's Patriot missile defense systems. It begins in California with a little girl raised by 2 moms. Although I had a fairly typical childhood, took ballet, played violin, I also marched for equality. I like to think I've been defending freedom from an early age. When I was 6 years old, one of my moms had an accident that left her paralyzed. Doctors said she might never walk again. But she tapped into my family's pride to get back on her feet, eventually standing at the altar to marry my other mom. With such powerful role models, I finished high school at the top of my class, and then attended UC Davis, where I joined a sorority full of other strong women. But as graduation approached, I began feeling like I'd been handed so much in life, a sorority girl stereotype. Sure, I'd spent my life around inspiring women, but what had I really achieved on my own? One of my sorority sisters was studying abroad in Italy, Another was climbing Mount Everest. I needed my own adventures, my own challenge. And after meeting with an Army recruiter, I found it. A way to prove my inner strength and maybe shatter some stereotypes along the way. I'm U.S. Army Corporal Emma Malone Lord, and I answered my calling.
Now, General Boykin, I know I've seen you at a conference where you contrasted that recruiting video, United States military recruiting video, of some girl who is raised by two lesbian moms, and now she's out holding a sign in a so-called pride parade, and now she wants to grow up and aspire to be a member of the armed services. I don't know who in the world they think that they are targeting in that audience, but it certainly doesn't raise my testosterone levels to want to come and join this unique fighting group. And certainly it doesn't make me want to aspire to be part of this group. You contrasted that with a recruiting video that I saw that the Russians were doing. And it was the testosterone type of macho type of recruiting video. What are we doing? We are destroying our military.
That's right. I say again, if you want warriors, then you train warriors. And you haven't seen anything coming out of the U.S. military that applies that principle, that makes it clear that what we want is we want rough, tough, rugged men and women. It's both, that are ready to set foot on a foreign soil and to win a war there, a war against people that want to kill us, to destroy us, and to essentially make us go away as a nation.
You know, we've seen the recruiting levels across the board at historic levels. And in fact, some of the numbers right now are going back to 1973, when in 1973 we went from the mandatory draft to a voluntary service. Now some of our recruiting numbers go back to numbers lower than we first had when it became a voluntary service. They're under recruiting because people are not coming into the military. They are not coming for a lot of reasons, and I think we know why. But some people that are the best recruiters, like yourself and others, who have DNA, so to speak, in your system of fighting for our country, are no longer telling people that this is the place to serve at this time with this kind of administration. You know, General Boykin, it's an incredible situation that we face. But what can people do? You mentioned that obviously we have leadership in the White House that doesn't understand or respect our military, that is imposing this LGBTQ, abortion, diversity, equity, inclusion idea into the military rather than training it. We also have some at the highest levels of the Pentagon. But we also have some that are just below the Pentagon and they're high-level commanders, and they have become to a situation where if they want to keep their job or get advanced, they have to follow the protocol. How do we change that?
Let me say, the simple answer to your question is, when you go to vote, think hard about what you're doing and what your responsibilities are as an American citizen. Because when you put somebody in that doesn't appreciate the military, doesn't understand what the military's mission is, and quite frankly, is far more focused on things like pronouns and forcing people to get vaccinations that they don't want, you're doing those young men and women in America a disservice. So vote, and vote the right way. But the second thing is, what you need to do is you need to get the Congress engaged as well. You need to talk to the Congress. You need to find out who your representatives are, and you need to let them know that, as far as you are concerned, they're not doing their job. And they may be one of those that's doing all he can or she can. And if that's the case, tell them so, and tell them you stand with them and ask them what you can do for them. And don't ever think that they don't pay attention to what comes into their office on the phone and fax and emails. They do pay attention to that stuff, and they keep a record of it because they want to see where the American public is. But that we've got to engage our Congress and make sure that they understand your son, your daughter, your neighbor's son or daughter. You let them know what you see going on, and it does help.
Well, what we see happening in Israel and the Middle East, Iran and its ultimate goal to export terrorism, and it's not going to stop in Israel. It's also focused here in the United States and around the world. And then the uprising of these terrorist cells around the country and our open border. We have a lot to do. And people, like you say, vote, vote, vote. Learn about the process. Vote from the highest levels to the lowest levels. And don't forget members of Congress. General Boykin, thank you for your incredible service, for your love for God and your love and service to this country. We owe a debt of gratitude to you, as do all the people in America. And thank you for joining us today on Freedom Alive.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. And thanks for all you're doing. And that team you have is a rugged group of patriotic Americans. So God bless you.
God bless. Thank you.
Matt, what a remarkable contrast you outlined there with General Boykin. His experience, what he saw, his reliance on his faith, how his faith grew, the miracles that he saw during his time of service, and contrast that to what we're seeing now with our military.
Yeah, you know, when you think of what's going on in the military, and he has firsthand knowledge of it from not only serving, but obviously seeing what's happening now, there's a real concern, because when you look at the volatility around the world, Iran, China, Middle East, other areas, there can be an explosion that happens very quickly. We need a very strong military. And right now, the way that we're recruiting and training and the policies in the military are undermining military readiness. We need good leadership at the top. We need it at the Pentagon. We need it at the level of operations just below the Pentagon as well. There needs to be a strong resolve to support the men and women of the military and make sure that they are a ready fighting force, because we face more threats now than we ever have in decades.
Thank you. Elections have consequences. It's up to us to make the right decisions. In closing, remember Galatians 5, verse 1, which says it was for freedom that Christ set us free. Therefore, keep standing firm and do not be subject again to a yoke of slavery. Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. So join us here next time, where you'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again for Freedom Alive.